Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Ever wonder about the life of a travel blogger? Well, in this episode, you get to hear about a travel blogger who was originally coined a mom blogger because that's when she started traveling and blogging, was when she had kids at home. This is Carol Kane of Gone Girl Travel, and she'll be sharing her solo travel experiences as well as telling you a little bit about the travel blogger lifestyle. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. Ladies, it's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation. Today, I'd like to welcome Carol Kane to our show. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, thank you.
So great to have you here. And we'll tell everybody at the end where they can find you, but you have a ton of rich experiences to share with everybody. And so I'd like you to start by telling us where it all began. I'd like to hear a little bit about where did your first solo journey start?
My first very solo journey was right after I left my home, living with my dad. I grew up in a very strict Latin household. I lived in the Dominican Republic, and very traditional in the sense of my role as what my roles as a woman were. So my role was, I had the luxury that I could go to college, but other than that, my role was to pretty much get married, have children, be a good housewife or a good wife or whatever. And then I swore I would never do anything like that ever. When I left my house when I was about 17 and a half. And then I went to Italy. And,
okay. So you're 17 and a half, leaving home for the first time, deciding to buck all societal expectations for your women in your culture, and you're heading off to Italy.
Yeah, I had been there before. I'd been there before with my father, and I had family. I have a family there, my stepmother's family there, and so it wasn't completely unfamiliar, but it was a good opportunity for me to kind of experience it on my own. I felt it was a far enough place where my dad wouldn't know what I was doing, couldn't call anybody to check up on me. So I could, kind of figure life out and make mistakes and not have anybody sort of call me out on them. And plus at that time, which was a while ago, it was the 1980s. At that time, there wasn't a lot of diversity in Italy, like especially in northern Italy. So I would go there, and a woman of color or of my complexion, you either had like really African sort of immigrants there, then the traditional northern Italian, and then there was me, and everybody thought I was Brazilian. So I thought that was kind of funny, and I wasn't really exposed to that sort of, it really made me look at myself in terms of how the world outside of the Dominican Republic or New York City looked at me. So it was a big learning experience for me as well. Plus I thought the guys were cute and, that whole thing.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. So at 17 and you're trying to go out and spread your wings and fly, but there is a bit of a safety net there. Right. What was your intention at that point? What were you thinking was going to be, what was going to happen for you and what was going to be possible for you there that wasn't going to be possible in the DR?
I honestly believed that I was going to go to school there. I thought I would live there forever, or, actually not forever. I envisioned that I would travel throughout Europe and just experience that sense of freedom that I didn't really have. And I don't know, it was very empowering. So I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even really speak the language very well. But I was very scared of the unknown. I was very sheltered in a way growing up. So I was also shy. But it was that fear and sort of that insecurity and all of those things that encouraged me, because I felt that being afraid, and I always like to say, I don't, it's not that I'm fearless, it's that I don't like being afraid. And it's been the thing that has always guided me in putting myself into new situations. And I think that that's pretty much where that started, where I was like very much afraid, but I thought I want to see how it goes. And I ended up not going to school there. I ended up moving to New York, and it was more of a language issue for me.
Okay.
But I'm really proud of myself that I gave it a go.
So you were going to be afraid and do it anyway. And your spirit says, it's not that I'm fearless. It's just that I don't like being afraid.
Yeah. I felt that. I feel that.
I like that.
I just feel that it control. It's very controlling. I was very, again, growing up in a very strict household, I was always afraid that would disappoint somebody, that somebody would, that I would get in trouble with somebody, that somebody would tell my father or somebody in my family that I did something wrong, and so I lived in this constant fear of not being what people expected me to be. And then when I realized I didn't, I just, I don't know, I felt like, oh, I'm 18 now or whatever. I can be whatever I want to be.
Well, you get to be your own person. And that's probably one of the first times where you're feeling like you can make choices for yourself.
Right. And so,
fair enough.
But, but still you're very much afraid. And I went without the support that usually a lot of kids, when they leave home, they have the support of a parent or somebody financially or, morally or whatever it is,
right.
I didn't have any of that, but
what did your dad say?
My dad, I don't know. Actually, my dad actually doesn't know that I went to Italy.
Wait a second. Is this like all things are being revealed right now and I'm on an undercover type of show?
To just go to New York and, so I did like a little hop kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally right on the way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really, it was really something that I just needed to do on my own. And it was great. It was this first time that I tasted freedom. But at the same time, I knew, so it was also the kind of thing where if there was a group of kids or, people my age that were like in a room doing pot or something, I was like, okay, I can't do this because I can't get in any sort of trouble where my dad would need to be called.
Right. Well, that's fair. So there's still the fear of dad in this. That's good. Right. We appreciate knowing that. So what did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about yourself through the process?
Well, just that I'm a lot stronger than I was told that I would be, and that, well, initially, right, the first few things that I learned and it kind of guided me as well. The first few things that I learned is that I had this very strong male figure who I respected, who said, if you do this and not that, if you do that and not this, these are going to be the consequences. This is going to not work out for you. And I went and I did some of those things anyway and realized, oh, wait a minute, the sky is not going to fall. I'm not going to be, ostracized by society. I'm not going to fail as a human being. And then I realized that a lot of times people will put these conditions on you or sort of instill this sort of fear or insecurity in you, and to maybe in their mind they're trying to protect you, but they're also controlling you. And then when you allow that to happen, you don't get to experience what your true potential could possibly be. And I'm pretty adventurous. I'm pretty outgoing. I'm still, I still get those little butterflies and things when I go into a new situation. But I know that I can overcome it. I know that I'm not going to be crying in a corner somewhere because I can't deal. So.
Well, and let's talk about that for just a second more. because one of the reasons why I do this podcast is because so many people think solo travel is so weird and so unsafe. And I'm like, well, what you just said about that fear is it might just be a reflection of their own fears or insecurities or apprehension or whatever that is.
Right.
And so they don't quite understand it. So therefore they're like, well, then that's weird. It's different.
Right. Right. And it's just, you're constantly, I mean, this happens throughout life, right? You're never, ever going to get to a point in your life where there isn't going to be somebody who's not going to tell you that you should be doing things this way. It does. This was something that happened to me when I was 17, 18, but I know that even now I'll think about my 65-year-old mother, and I'll see her do something. And in my mind, I'm thinking she should not be doing that. Like, that's not, why are you doing that? But I don't ever tell her, Mom, you can't do that, because she knows what if she's putting herself in danger, what she does.
Sure.
But, we always think, 65-year-old woman should not be doing this thing. But I would never tell my mom that, she just couldn't even listen to me. But, and just to say, there's always somebody in place, at the ready to say, you shouldn't be doing that, or you can't do that,
It's so much easier to say no. And I will tell you for myself, that actually was a bigger revelation. I for sure used to be, and possibly still am, my gut instinct to something would be to say no. And then I would slowly come around to the yes. And I needed to take my time to consider, how to make it a yes. And one of my past guests was talking about the book, The Year of Yes. I don't recall the author right offhand, but what that conversation even did for me was it made me consider, why am I a no first? Is that serving me? Is that doing what I want it to do for me all the time? And what's the harm or pain in changing to being a little bit more yes first? So that's been interesting. But let's talk a little bit about your cultural differences as it relates to some of this solo travel stuff, because as we were preparing for the podcast, one of the things that you mentioned is that idea of solo, especially women solo, is just not something that you're going to find in the Latina culture. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you've seen and experienced and how that's impacted you.
Yeah, it's one thing, it's a little lonely, right? Because I'll go out there and and just trying to find someone who is culturally, I don't know how to explain it. It's just culturally connect with you. I have friends who, for example, maybe grew up in Washington Heights where I lived, or is of Dominican heritage like I am, or Dominican New Yorker like I am. And when you find people like that who have these common, you share these commonalities with, there's a lot of times things that you don't even have to say, right? Like you can just look at each other and it's understood. And, and we all have that. And that's such a comfortable, such a nice, comfortable, cozy place to be. And sometimes when you're traveling, you're and especially when you're traveling alone, you're keeping track of so much, right? Whether it's your budget or your where you are in the map, or your schedule, or whatever it may be. And it would be nice sometimes to just be able to go to the bar or go to wherever and not have to talk too much, not have to explain so much to someone, because they get it, they understand. And so I feel like a lot of times when, traveling as a Latina, traveling as a person of color alone, a lot of times you're answering a lot of questions based on people's lack of understanding. And I get that even as an American, right? Like people will say to me, oh, is it true that you guys like to watch, TV and eat, how everybody has a gun, No, but seriously, right? And so you spend a lot of time traveling when you're different, when you're the different one. Sure. You spend a lot of time answering these questions, which is fine. But every once in a while, to be able to find somebody who you share something in common and you don't have to have these conversations with is kind of nice.
Well, yeah, and that's part of this whole podcast dialogue is that, we want to dispel the myth.
Right.
So for you're dispelling the myth of what it's like to be a Latina. But when I'm talking to solo travelers, we're also dispelling the myth that we're all homosexual. Or that we're
very lonely,
or that none of us have boyfriends or husbands or partners of any way, shape, or form, or that all of our friends don't want to even travel with us. So we must be such horrible people to travel with, or people in general, so that they don't want to travel with us. And so it's almost like this comedy of presumptions that go along with being a solo traveler.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, people are always, I'll get a lot because I have 3 kids and a husband.
Oh my goodness, you can travel solo too?
All of whom I adore, very, very much. But I'll get a lot of, so once the shock of like, I have kids, right? Is, well, who's with the kids? Like if you're here, then who's with them? I get that all the time.
And so does that make you like a bad mother in there? The myth is that you're only a bad mother would do that, or only a bad wife, or in somebody who's in a bad situation.
Yeah. I'm neglecting somebody.
Oh my goodness.
Neglected.
Okay.
But what's funny is my husband told me recently that at work, he gets a lot of people who follow me on Instagram and they see that I'm on all these trips. Yeah. He'll get people asking him, how do you feel about the fact that she's traveling so much without you? And it's so crappy, right? Because sometimes with that I mean, it hasn't happened to him, although in all honesty, and he wrote about this on my website. He wrote about this on my blog.
Nice.
But when I first started, he was more jealous of not being able to go, not jealous of me and of the men that I could potentially meet,
sure,
but of that this was my job and my life and my lifestyle, and he had to go to work 9 to 5, right? So it's a human thing where he was like, it was difficult, and we went through like a difficult sort of patch, but we worked it out. And he wrote about that so that people would understand it.
Nice.
And talked about how proud he is of me and how what I do has allowed our family and our children to also, be offered a lot of opportunities that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Absolutely.
But no, I mean, I get it a lot, especially I think, I don't know how many, I've encountered a lot of fathers and husbands on the road, and I don't know if people are worrying as much about where their wives are, their kids, how their marriage is holding up because they're, in Fiji for like 10 days. Like, I don't know.
Absolutely. Have you been to Fiji for 10 days?
I have.
Oh
yeah,
gosh.
You kind of have to go to Fiji for 10 days. It's pretty far.
I know. No, so I scuba dive, and I did do the shark diving at the Benga Lagoon Resort, and wow.
Oh yeah. Wow. Especially as a scuba diver. Oh my God, that's like such heaven.
It was sort of nirvana. Yeah, I was pretty surprised that how amazing that was. But okay, so let's talk about a couple of your other solo travels. But before we get into that, and we alluded to the fact that this is part of your work, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what you mean by this is your work, and then we can come back to some of your other adventures.
So when I first started blogging, I did it more with the focus of New York City, and my kids were little, and sort of like what that, trying to educate people on how to get around this city without spending a lot of money, or the best places to see it and that kind of thing. And it was with a lot of, it was a lot with my kids. And at that time, that was 2008. So at that time, I I didn't really know about travel blogging. I didn't know anything.
Yes.
Right? I was just like writing. And so the immediately I fell into this category, even though I was writing about travel in New York, I fell into this category of mommy blogger, because that's what, if you're a woman and you have kids, you blog, that's what you are. And so that's what I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is what I am. But then I realized that, one, I love travel. My dad worked in hospitality, so I was always in hotels and traveling and doing things. I did it on my own as a teenager, young adult, and I still did it. And I felt like I was really good at it. It was the one thing that I enjoyed doing. And so I focused on that and kind of pulled myself a little bit away from that label that was given to me. But still struggled to even identify as a travel blogger, because the image that you have out there in the space, well, at that time anyway, was a lot of backpackers, very young, single, kind of nomads, no home base, whatever, left my job, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't know if I fit now, because I have a home and I have a family, and I'm not going to like quit everything and travel the world. So I really had to search that and feel confident in that. But eventually doing it on my site, people enjoyed what I had to say. And once you get an audience, and once you get people that want, that are interested in what you have to say, then you get picked up by other people who pay you to say what you have to say.
Exactly.
And then you get, partnerships. And even that was kind of something that I had to learn how to do, not take everything, not say yes to everything, turn things down, be very selective. Do I really even want to talk about this? Do I really, So learning how to be selective, learning how to be respectful of my time with my family, which was also important to me, and figuring it out in terms of what kind of stories I wanted to say. I've been able to really form great relationships with not only brands, but also with destinations. So like, for example, I've done work with Etude France, which is the tourism board for France. I've worked with them for like 3-4 years in a row, going to France and doing wine pieces for them and meeting winemakers and things like that. So
nice.
Those kinds of relationships, and being and understanding that, yes, I'm traveling to fabulous places, so there's an expectation attached, obviously, when you're working with somebody. But then, knowing that at the end of the day, I'm going to come out with an opportunity, to make money, that I can then take my own trip that's not attached to anything or any sort of responsibility to anybody else.
So when you do travel for work and you get to go on these pretty amazing experiences, one of the things that I talk to people about is how travel is so important for personal discovery and growth. And so how are you experiencing that? Because I will tell you that some of the people that are my followers are people who are very curious about that travel blogger lifestyle. And, how are you still growing and developing when you're out there also working and making sure that you're producing the best content you can?
I think that over time, it gets a lot easier to find your own voice and to have the freedom to express your own voice and sort of seek out the story that you want, that appeals to you and to your desire to learn something more. So what I mean by that is, when I started out, I would go on these like massive press trips, and there would be, tons of people in the group, right? And we were, we were tied to like a set schedule, and because I'm starting out, I'm like, yes, whatever you want, like, sure, I'll get up at 6 and sure, and not whatever. And so, yeah. And then after you go on the press trip, which isn't a paid gig, really, it's sponsored in the sense that they cover all your expenses, but you're not getting paid to go. Then come home and then write a story that you could then sell to somebody. So when at the very beginning, it's more about, are you a good writer? Do you have an audience? Do you have a voice that would appeal to someone? Are you likable? And all these other things.
Right.
And then over the years, when you gain enough of a reputation and people trust you and they know that you're professional no matter what, and that you're not going to be going to places, even on a vacation, and make a fool out of yourself, make a fool out of them, make a fool out of your country or whatever it may be.
Got it.
Then people allow for more leeway.
Okay. It's not as structured.
It's not as structured. I have the opportunity a lot more now than before when I started. I have the opportunity to travel on my own. I have, the opportunity to go with my family if I want to. I mean, I might have to cover their expenses, but
sure.
But a lot of times people will just say, we just want you to come and find your own story and just kind of talk about us in a way that tell people what you personally experienced and what you personally walked away with. And once you're given that, that's such a gift, right? Because they're hosting you, but they're also giving you the freedom they're not controlling your story and they're not controlling your voice.
Right.
I'm very much about, being honest. I mean, in real life, I'll say, like, I swear like a sailor because I'm from Brooklyn. And so every other word is F this and whatever, right? So you'll never see that on my blog.
No, right. Because you're representing properly, but.
Right.
Yes.
In that sense, I will say I censor that part of me.
Sure.
But when I have a really strong opinion about something, or if, I see there's a story that really needs to be told, I can sit back and sort of measure the level of controversy and how, it might be taken by any party involved, but I'm still very much about telling the story as I feel it and as I see it. So, I recently went to Jerusalem as part of TBAX, had a conference there just recently, the Travel Bloggers Exchange Conference. And I spoke there, so I was hosted by Jerusalem, but I went on my own, took the public bus over to Palestine, because I felt like there was a lot about that relationship that I didn't understand. And there was a lot that I really needed to see for myself, and a story that I felt I needed to tell. And people were like, oh my God, you can't write about this. Like, this is not good. Like, you can't, they didn't know what I was going to say, but they were like, you were invited by Jerusalem. How are you going to write about Palestine?
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
And I was like, well, there's a story here. Like, there's some, and I went to other blogs to see.
You did your homework.
Yeah. I went to other blogs to see how other travel bloggers kind of dealt with the conflict that you immediately encounter. And it was very much about, oh, this is awesome, this tour, this bus, and the food, and very much like a travel guide, how we do, which was beautiful and was fine. But that's not the story I wanted to say, to say. Like, I said it, and I came back home. I spoke to a lot of my friends who are Jewish, and I was like, I have something that I want to say, and I don't want to be ignorant about it. So let's talk about it.
Right.
And people did, and gave me a lot of resources. But at the end of the day, I wrote that story because it felt personal to me. The segregation felt personal to me as a person of color. It felt very personal as an American going there and realizing, oh my God, there's only so much of the story that we know as Americans.
Absolutely.
Without, but still being respectful of, Jerusalem and the Jewish community, I thought. So
this innate sense of curiosity, I think is, and really that's one of the joys of being able to share your stories as a blogger, is that, there's a lot of people who probably have that same curiosity and won't ever get that chance to satisfy it.
Yeah. And I think I say I admit that it might also be the courage to say something that maybe people are like, oh, I don't really want to don't know if that's okay. I admit that that's also a little bit of privilege, right? Like if I don't get, if whatever, people don't want to like sponsor me on a trip, it's not like I'm never going to travel again. Right. So there are people that rely on these types of relationships to be able to travel. Whereas I have, and I call it that, I have the privilege where if nobody ever wanted to ever sponsor a trip for me ever again, I will still be able to travel.
Sure.
So I know that there's that. I know that people are concerned about their brand and their image and their relationships with partners, blah, blah, blah. I am fortunate to have been doing this long enough that that's not such a risk for me.
Well, there is like an obligation to some degree, but there's also, it sounds like the way that you're able to do it at this point in your career of travel blogging, that there's also some freedom because of how you've done your work thus far.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that I established myself from the beginning as somebody who is going to, express herself, has strong opinions. And I think once that was awesome, because once I did that, then that's what I basically am known for.
Well, yeah. So once you've done it, once you've asserted it, you can keep asserting it. It's once you've never done it and then you start doing it, people are going to be like, well, where was that all these other times?
Right. And I mean, it's funny. I didn't really do it with intention. Like I wasn't like, I want to be known as, but I also knew that, it's also about how I started. I had left a career in public relations where I was getting paid good money. I basically said, my life is going to be about taking care of my kids. And I sort of found this way, this other venue to express myself creatively. And it worked out for me. But I felt also it was like a second chance, because I was like, well, I just left this career, especially public relations, where the message is very much controlled and very, very crafted, right? And you are beholden to so many clients and so many people. And so then I had this opportunity to continue to write and to continue to be in media, even if on the other side. And I was like, well, I'm just going to use it as myself, as I never really got a chance to do before. It worked out for me. So, I'm very lucky that way, because I don't know that I don't know how much I could censor myself at this point at 46 years old. I don't know.
Amen. Amen. Right?
Yeah. So
let me find out a little bit about, some of the biggest lessons that you've learned through your solo travels or through your travels in general. Again, well, when you're traveling, as a blogger, aside from those fam trips or those media trips and things like that, are you generally alone, or are you with others?
I mean, usually at this point, if I'm not alone, I'm with my family.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I like seeing people that I've met in the space. That's why I still will go to like conferences, like TBACs and stuff. It's not so much. I mean, I think we're always learning. There's always opportunity to learn. But I wouldn't say, those conferences never teach me anything.
Right. No,
there's always an opportunity to learn. But I mean, I go because I want to see the people that I've grown up with in a way, and I love that. But I don't really enjoy the press trips anymore. And I really do enjoy the challenges of being alone. And again, it's that constant confrontation of my fears and my insecurities. I don't want to become too comfortable. I don't want to, you don't take things for granted when, when you're shaken in a way. So
it keeps you sharp.
It does. And so I feel like my favorite thing to do is I'll go somewhere by myself and I'll have an amazing, like this crazy experience. And then I'll come back home and I'm like, all right, kids, pack it up. We're going. to this amazing place that I've been to that you have to come with me and experience. And then it'll be a totally different experience, right?
Right.
It'll still be great and everything, but it's now I'm seeing it through their eyes.
Yes.
And so it's a totally different experience. But I like to do that. I like to go somewhere by myself, whatever happens, and then, take my family and say, you guys got to see this. Yeah.
Can you give me an example of one of those places that was just this like, okay, I've got to get my family back here?
Well, we're going to go to Ireland and Scotland this fall because I fell in love with it, and I keep telling my husband his family's Irish Scottish, but he's never been to Scotland, and I'm like, honey, you don't understand, because he doesn't understand what is it. It's rainy, it's cloudy, the stereotype,
right?
And I'm like, no, you don't understand. You have to be there. It's
okay.
So that's one place, but I took my kids on a road trip with me to Montana. Not that long ago.
That's a bit of a hike from New York.
It's a bit of a hike, and it was just me and the kids. My husband didn't go, and it was just kind of showing them that culture, the lifestyle there, the way people are, the wide open spaces, geographically, or just the landscape, everything. It wasn't something that my kids were familiar with. And I remember when I first went to Montana, I'd never seen mountains that big, right? Like I've never seen landscape like that. So I felt, wow, me as an adult, I thought, oh my God, this made such an impression on me.
Right.
I can't even imagine how my children are going to see this.
Right.
Right.
Fair enough.
And the same thing, I took them on a volunteer trip in the Dominican Republic, where my family's from, and they'd never been to the Dominican Republic. And I could have gone another way. I could have taken them to a nice, all-inclusive, posh resort. But I was like, I want them to first see it for real. Like when I talk to them about, poverty, like the poverty that I saw growing up, I want them to that be cemented in their heads.
Yep.
First. And then once they've seen that, then we'll go back and we'll do, the nice. And so that's how that's how usually I'll try to do it with my kids, my family.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks.
So if there were someone who were interested in getting started as a travel blogger, and again, my customers, my audience is a lot of these midlife women.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that idea of, could I even do something at this stage? What would your thoughts be about someone who might be interested in getting started, even at midlife or later?
I wish I could pocket the emotion the mindset that I had when I first started, which was I didn't have any knowledge of what travel blogging was, right? So I just did it. I didn't know, oh my gosh, I have to get somebody to notice me, and I have to get somebody has to read me, and I have to impress these people, and I have to get these many followers on Twitter. But I was completely clueless. And so all I did was I thought my husband's family in Wisconsin would enjoy this. and I just wrote like I would go out, put my kids in a double stroller, go into New York, and it was being, really gentrified at that time. And I would get really Brooklyn about it, like true New York, like, no, there's no way I'm paying $100 for an indoor play area. This is what you do when you have kids in New York. And so I would take them and I would do this stuff.
So passionate. I love it.
Oh my God. I was so mad when I wrote and that's the thing, when I wrote my blog, I was really like passionate. I had like a focus. My focus was like, I'm going to tell people that New York is not about, $35 cupcakes and whatever, waiting online at expensive restaurants. I'm going to tell people what it's really like, man. And I was that like lit about it. And so I wrote, I just wrote, and people who wanted to travel to New York were like, oh my gosh, people who lived in New York were like, I never knew that about my city. And I think when that is all that fueled me, right, was just like proving these people wrong. That's all that fueled me. And so I was able to kind of just write about, and then I wrote about my vacations, when we took vacations. And I always tell people that too. I'm like, if you go on a vacation, just write about it. Write about what you loved about it, what you think could have been better, what you think, because people are like, oh, I don't like to write anything negative. I'm like, well, what would you have what could they have done better? How would this have been easier for you? More pleasant? Where could you have seen your money better spent?
That's fair. Yep.
And write about it like you're telling somebody who you really care about, that you want to be very protective of their time, their very, limited vacation time, and you want to be very protective of their very limited budget.
Yep.
And you want to do it in a way, the thing is, you don't want to do it in a way that they come back and they're like, oh, Carol lied to me. She said this was an amazing restaurant and it sucks.
Yep.
Because Carol was more occupied with impressing the chef than she was about really protecting her friend who's going to go spend money there. So I always tell people, always, no matter what, like, write about your vacation, write about your weekend getaway, write about your local, restaurant that just opened that just blew your mind. It doesn't have to be too far away destinations either. It could be something that you really enjoyed and you want people to know about.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, okay. So where are you off to next?
So next, I am going to Alabama because that is where T-Bex is. And it sounds, and it's so funny. I tell people then, they're like, why are you going to Alabama? I'm like, right, exactly. Why would anyone go to Alabama? That's what I'm going to go to find out. Right. Why would a Dominican New Yorker of color during these amazing times in the U.S. go to Alabama? So that's what I'm going to go find out. And then, just probably go to Montreal. I'm dying to go to Canada. This year I haven't gone. And then, of course, we're planning our big trip to Europe later this year. So
that's awesome.
But we do a lot of hiking. So I do a lot of national parks, and we do a lot of hiking during the summer and the spring. So I'm really looking forward to that, which is another thing that supposedly big-boned women of color don't do. But I'm going to be there. So
it sounds like you're ready to break all the stereotypes, and I am so excited to get to cheer you on with that, Carol. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with our listeners today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you when we follow you. So let's make sure that we know where everybody can find you. And this will also be posted in our show notes.
So I'm Girl Gone Travel on social media, and my website is girlgonetravel.com.
Girl Gone Travel. And like I said, I'll have that posted in the show notes so you can reach out and find Carol and see what adventures she is up to next. Thank you again, Carol. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Wasn't it great to hear some of the stories and tips that Carol shared with us today? One of the things that really resonated with me was how important it was to find your voice and be authentic and true to your voice. And I think that applies to us whether we're blogging about travel or whether we're just being involved in the travel ourselves and advocating for ourselves in any part of our life. We've reached the end of today's episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Go to www.transformviatravel.com or join the Facebook community at facebook.com/transformviatravel. You can also find Go Solo Live on Twitter. If you like what you've heard, please invite your friends to listen to Go Solo Live. And if you want to be a guest, reach out to me directly at jennifer@transformviatravel.com. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.